Some way along that wide passage on the upper level my foot plunged through a papery section of floor, and in my hard reaction I drove backward into the wall behind me. The wall itself collapsed and I found myself falling, in a clumsy stumble, flaying out with my hands to find something solid to cling to amid the crumbling rubble. I landed with a thump, much more quickly than I expected, and realized at once that I was inside one of Madame Jo's secret corridors. The wall I'd fallen through appeared to be as solid as all the others, but it was merely a plywood screen papered over with her ubiquitous Compton pattern. I stood up and brushed myself off in a very narrow, low corridor that snaked ahead, following the shapes and corners of the rooms it circumscribed. Metal grates were set into the walls of the rooms that the secret corridor passed. Some of them were low, near the floor, and others were higher. Beneath the higher metal grates were boxed steps. From the lowest of those steps I looked into a room through the heart-shaped gaps in the metal grille. I could see the whole room beyond. The cracked mirror on the wall, the burned and collapsed bed, and the rusted metal nightstand beside it. There were several steps above the one on which I stood, and I imagined her, Madame Jo, crouched there on the topmost step and breathing silently while she watched and watched. The corridor wound through several turns, and I lost my bearings, unsure in the enshrouding darkness if I faced the front of the house or the rear. At one point the secret corridor inclined sharply. I climbed upward until the higher metal grilles disappeared, and I stumbled in the dark upon a flight of steps. Feeling my way upward, I encountered a door. It was a small, paneled wooden door, so small and perfectly proportioned that it might have been furnished for a child's playhouse. I tried the doorknob. It turned easily in my hand. I pushed it open, and shrank back immediately at the inward rush of light from beyond. I stepped into an attic room lit by a row of 4 stained glass dormer windows that peeped like little chapels and reached out over the external roof of the house. The fire had reached the room, but it had failed to destroy it. The walls were darkened, splashed with streaky burned shadows, and the floor was holed in places to reveal a deep sandwich layer between it and the ceiling of the room below. Parts of the long room, however, were quite solid and untouched by the flames. In those islands of exotically carpeted floor and unblemished wall space, furniture still stood intact and unmarked. And in the stiff, enwrapping arms of a throne-like chair, her face twisted in a manic stare, was Madame Jo. As I approached her I realized that the malevolent stare wasn't directed at me. She was staring with hatred and spite at some point in the past, some place or person or event that held her mind as firmly as a chain holds a dancing bear. Her face was made up with a thick smear and powdering of cosmetics. It was a mask, more tragic, for all its diluted exaggerations, than grotesque. The painted mouth was bigger than her own lips. The scrawled eyebrows were larger than the real ones. The daubed cheeks were higher than the bones beneath them. When I stood near enough, I saw that there was a trickle of drool dripping, from the corner of her mouth into her lap. The smell of alcohol, undiluted gin, wreathed her and coiled into other smells, more foul and sickening. Her hair was almost concealed by a wig. The thick coils of the black, pompadour wig hung slightly askew, revealing the short, sparse gray hair beneath. She was dressed in a green silk cheongsam. The neck of the dress covered her throat almost to her chin. Her legs were folded, with her feet resting on the seat of the chair beside her. They were tiny feet, the size of a small child's feet, enclosed in soft, silk slippers. Her hands, as limp and expressionless as her slack mouth, lay in her lap like things washed up on a deserted shore. It was impossible for me to tell her age or her nationality. She might have been Spanish, she might have been Russian, she might have been Indian, in part, or Chinese, or even Greek. And Carla was right, she had been beautiful once. It was the kind of beauty that grows from the sum of its parts rather than from any one outstanding feature. A beauty that strikes the eye rather than the heart, and a beauty that sours if it isn't nourished by some goodness from within. And she wasn't beautiful then, in that moment. She was ugly, and Didier was right, too. She was beaten and broken and finished. She was floating on the black lake, and soon the dark water would drag her under. There was a deep silence where her mind used to be, and a blank, uncraving emptiness where once her cruel and scheming life had ruled. Standing there, invisible to her, I was astonished and bewildered to realize that I felt not angry or vengeful, but ashamed. I felt ashamed that I'd filled my heart with revenge. The part of me that had wanted to, what? Had I really wanted to kill her? Was the very part that was like her. I looked at her, and I knew that I was looking at myself, my own future, my destiny, if I couldn't rid my heart of its vindictiveness. And I knew, as well, that the revenge I'd fed myself with and planned through the weeks of my recuperation in Pakistan was not merely hers, not only hers. I was striking out at myself, and at a guilt I could only face in that moment of shame as I looked at her. It was the guilt I felt for Cater's death. I was his American, his guarantee against the warlords and pirates. If I'd been with him, as I was supposed to be, when he'd tried to take the horses to his village, the enemy might not have fired on him. It was foolish and, like most guilt, it only told one half of the story. There were Russian uniforms and weapons on some of the dead around Cater's body. Nazir had told me that. My being there probably wouldn't have changed a thing. They would have captured me or killed me, and the result for Cater would have been the same. But reason didn't play a big part in the guilt I'd felt, deep in my heart, since the moment I'd seen his dead face beneath its shroud of snow. Once I'd faced it, I couldn't shake the shame. And somehow, the blame and repining sorrow changed me. I felt the vengeful stone fall from the hating hand that had wanted to throw it. I felt light, as if light itself filled me and lifted me up. And I felt free, free enough to pity Madame Jo, and even to forgive her. And then I heard the scream. A heart-piercing shriek, as shrill as a wild pig's, pulled me round just in time to see Rajan, Madame Jo's eunuch servant, running at me at full speed. Caught off balance by the charge, I stumbled backward with his arms wrapped around my chest, and we crashed into and then through one of the attic windows. I was leaning out backwards, looking up under blue sky at the crazed servant and the eaves of the house behind his head. I felt the unmistakable cold trickle of blood on the top and the back of my head where the broken glass had made deep cuts. More glass fell in jagged shards as we wrestled in the smashed window, and I shook my head from side to save my eyes. Rajan clung to me and drove forward with his feet in a weird, running shuffle that gained him no space at all. It took me a moment to understand that he was trying to push me out through the window, to push us both out, into the big fall. And it was working. I felt my feet beginning to lift off the floor under the pressure of his effort, and I slipped further out through the little steeple of the dormer window. Growling with fury and desperation, I clutched at the window frame and dragged us back into the attic with all my strength. Rajan fell backward, and scrambled to his feet with astonishing speed to run shrieking at me again. There was no way to step around his quick charge, so we closed again in a murderous grapple. His hands locked on my throat. My left hand clawed at his face, looking for the eye. His long, curved fingernails were sharp, and they pierced the skin of my neck. Shouting from the pain, I found his ear with the fingers of my left hand, and used it to pull his head close enough to punch with my right. I hammered my fist into his face, 6, 7, 8 times until he wrenched free from me, tearing the ear half away from his head. He fell back a step and stood there, panting heavily and glaring at me with a hatred that was beyond reason or fear. His face was bloody. His lips were split into a broken tooth, and the skin over one eye, where the eyebrow had been shaved off, had opened up in an ugly cut. His bald head was cut and bleeding where he'd crashed through the glass. The blood was in one eye, and I guessed that his nose was broken. He should have quit. He had to quit. He didn't. Shrieking, shrill and weird, he ran at me. I sidestepped and slammed a hard, short right hand into the side of his head, but he reached out with his clawed hand as he fell, and clutched at my trousers. His momentum pulled us both down, and then he scrambled, crab-like, to cover me, reaching out for my neck. Once more the claws bit into my shoulder and my throat. He was lean, but he was strong and tall. I'd lost so much weight in Cater's war that we were evenly matched for strength. I rolled once, twice, but couldn't shake him. His head was tucked in close to mine, and I couldn't punch at him. I felt his mouth and his teeth against my neck. He was straining forward, butting heads with me and biting. His long, sharp claws punctured my throat to the stubs of his fingers. I reached down and found my knife. I pulled it out and around, and rammed it into his body. The blade went into his thigh, high up near the hip. He raised his head in a howl of pain, and I stabbed him in the neck, close to the shoulder. The knife went in through the front and deep into the shoulder, crunching an edge of bone and gristle on the way. He scrabbled at his throat, and rolled away from me until his body met the wall. He was beaten. There was no fight left in him. It was over. And then I heard the scream. I jerked my head around to see Rajan creeping out of the gap between the broken floor and the ceiling of the room below. It was the same man, or so it seemed, but whole and unharmed. The same bald head, shaved eyebrows, decorated eyes, and clawed fingernails painted as green as a grass snake. I swung round quickly to see that Rajan was still there, curled in a moaning heap against the wall. It's a twin, I thought stupidly. There's two of them. Why didn't anyone tell me? And I turned again, just as the screeching twin rushed at me. The second one had a knife in his hand. He held the thin, curved blade like a sword, sweeping it in a vicious arc as he ran. I allowed his frenzied sweep to pass and then stepped in close, jabbing downward with my own knife. It cut his arm and shoulder, but he was still free to move. His knife slashed backward toward me. He was fast enough to cut my forearm. Blood ran quickly from the wound, and rage pulled me into him with my right fist punching and jabbing with the knife. Then a sudden black, blood-tasting pain crashed into the back of my head, and I knew I'd been hit from behind. I scrambled past the twin, and twisted round to see wounded Rajan, his shirt painted on his skin with his own blood. There was a lump of wood in his hand. My head was ringing with the force of the blow he'd struck. Blood was running from wounds on my head, my neck, my shoulder, and the soft inside of my forearm. The twins began wailing again, and I knew they were about to make a new charge. A tiny seed of doubt ripened and burst open in my mind for the first time since the bizarre contest had begun. I might not win this. I grinned at them, shaping up for their charge with my fists high and my left foot forward. Okay, I thought. Let's go. Let's finish it. They ran at me, keening that high-pitched scream again. The one with the lump of wood, Rajan, swung it at me. I raised my left arm to block the blow. It came down hard on my shoulder, but I rammed my right fist into his face and he fell backward, his knees folding before he hit the floor. His brother slashed at my face with the knife. I ducked and weaved, but the knife cut my head at the back, above the neck. I came up under his guard and jammed my knife into his shoulder, all the way to the crank. I'd aimed for his chest, but it was still a useful wound because his arm below the knife went as limp as seaweed, and he screeched away from me in panic. Years of anger broke through, all the prison anger I'd buried in the shallow grave of my resentful self-control. The blood running down my face from the cuts and gashes on my head was liquid anger, thick and red and spilling from my mind. A furious strength ripped the muscles of my arms, shoulders, and back. I looked from Rajan and his twin to the imbecile in the chair. Kill them all, I thought, dragging the air in through clenched teeth, and growling it out again. I'll kill them all. I heard someone calling me back from the edge of the abyss into which Habib, and all those like him, had plunged. Lynn. Where are you, Lynn? In here, Didier, I shouted back. In the attic. You're very close. Can you hear me? I hear you, he shouted. I'm coming at once. Be careful. I called back, panting. There's two guys up here, and they're none too friendly. I heard the sound of his footsteps, and I heard him curse as he stumbled in the dark. He pushed open the little door and stooped to enter the room. There was a gun in his hand, and I was glad to see him. I watched his face as he quickly took in the scene. The blood on my face and arms, the blood on the bodies of the twins, the drooling figure in the chair. I saw his shocked surprise harden and settle into the grim, angry line of his mouth. Then he heard the scream. Rajan's brother, the one with the knife, let out that blood-numbing wool and ran at Didier, who swung his pistol round without hesitation and shot the man in the groin, near the hip. He crumpled and flung himself sideways, yowling sobs of pain as he rolled on the floor, doubled over his bleeding wound. Rajan limped to the throne-like chair and draped his body in front of Madame Jo, shielding her with his bare chest. He stared his hatred into Didier's eyes, and we knew that he was willing to take a bullet to protect her. Didier took a step towards him, and leveled the pistol at Rajan's heart. The Frenchman's face was set in a severe frown, but his pale eyes were calm, and gleaming with his cool and absolute dominion. That was the real man, the steel blade within the shabby, rusting scabbard. Didier Levy. One of the most capable and dangerous men in Bombay. "Do you want to do it?" he asked me, his face harder than anything else in the room. "No." "No?" he breathed, his eyes never leaving Rajan. "Take a look at yourself. Look at what they did, Lynn. You should shoot them." "No." "You should wound them, at the very least." "No. It is dangerous to let them live. Your history with these people is not good." "It's okay," I muttered. "You should shoot at least one of them, non?" "No." "Very well. Then I will shoot them for you." "No," I insisted. I was grateful that he'd stopped them from killing me, but far more thankful that he'd arrived in time to prevent me from killing them. Surging waves of nausea and relief crashed into my blood-red mind, draining the rage from me. I shivered as the last smile of shame trembled in my eyes. "I don't want to shoot them, and I don't want you to shoot them, either. I didn't want to fight them in the first place. I wouldn't have, if they hadn't attacked me first. They're only doing what I'd do if I loved her. They're only trying to protect her. They're not against me. It's not about me. It's about her. Leave them alone." "And what about her?" "You were right," I said quietly. "She's finished. She's already dead. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. I guess I had to see it for myself." I reached out to cover the gun in Didier's hand. Rajan flinched and flexed. His twin, crying out in pain, began to drag himself away from us along the edge of the wall. Then I slowly pushed Didier's hand downward until the gun was at his side. Rajan met my eyes. I saw the surprise and fear in his black eyes soften into relief. He held the stare a moment longer and then limped to his brother's side. With Didier close behind me, I made my way along the secret corridor and back to the blackened stairs. "I owe you one, Didier," I admitted, grinning into the dark. "Certainly you do," he replied, and then the stairs crumbled beneath us and we fell, tumbling in and through the burned and broken wood until we hit the hard floor below. Spluttering and coughing in the cloud of charcoal dust and floating fibers, I wriggled against my fallen friend to sit upright. My neck was stiff and sore, and I'd landed on my wrist and shoulder, spraining them both, but I seemed to be intact and otherwise unbroken. Didier had landed on me, and I heard him moaning grumpily. "Are you okay, man? Jesus, what a fall. Are you all right?" "That's it," Didier snarled. "I'm going back up there to shoot that woman." We laughed as we hobbled out of the ruined palace together, and the laughter stayed with us in the hours that followed while we bathed our wounds and dressed them. Didier gave me a clean shirt and trousers to wear. His wardrobe was surprisingly stylish and colorful for a man who dressed in such a drab uniform at Leopold's. He explained that most of those bright new clothes had been left with him by lovers who'd never returned for them, and I thought of Carla, giving me clothes that had once belonged to her lovers. And the laughter bubbled up anew as we ate a meal together at Leopold's while Didier talked of his most recent romantic disasters. We were laughing still when Vikram Patel ran up the steps with his arms wide in an excited greeting. "Lynn." "Vikram." I stood just in time to receive his flying hug. Holding my shoulders with his arms straight, he looked me over, frowning at the cuts on my head and face. "Fuck, man, what happened to you?" he asked. His clothes were still black, and still inspired by the cowboy dream, but they were much more subdued and subtle. That was Letty's influence, I guessed. Although the new, inexcessive look suited him, I was relieved and comforted to see that his beloved hat still hung on his back from the cord at his throat. "You should see the other guys," I answered, flicking a glance at Didier. "So why didn't you tell me you're back, man? I only got back today, and I've been kind of busy." "How's Letty?" "She's great, Yar," he responded cheerily, taking a seat. "She's going into this business thing, this multi-fucking media thing, with Carla and her new boyfriend. It's going to be damn good." I turned my head to look at Didier, who shrugged non-committally and then glared at Vikram with his teeth bared in fury. "Shit, man." Vikram apologized, clearly stricken. "I thought you knew. I thought Didier would have told you, yar." "Carla is back in Bombay," Didier explained, silencing Vikram with another stern frown. "She has a new man, a boyfriend, she calls him. His name is Ranjit, but he likes everyone to call him Jeet. He's not a bad guy," Vikram added, smiling hopefully. "I think you'll like him, Lynn." "Oh, really, Vikram?" Didier hissed, wincing for me. "It's okay," I said, smiling at each of them in turn. I caught the eye of our waiter and nodded to him, gesturing for a new round of drinks. We were silent until they arrived and the drinks were poured, and then, with the glasses in the air, I proposed a toast. "To Carla, I propose, may she have 10 daughters, and may they all marry well." "To Carla," the others echoed, clashing glasses and throwing back the drinks. We were sharing our third toast, to someone's pet dog, I think, when Mahmoud Melbaf walked into the happy, noisy, chattering restaurant and looked at me with eyes that were still up there, on the frozen mountains of the war. "What happened to you?" he asked quickly, looking at the cuts on my face and head when I rose to greet him. "Nothing," I smiled. "Who did this?" he asked more urgently. "I had a run-in with Madame Jo's guys," I answered, and he relaxed a little. "Why? What's up? Nazir told me you would be here," he whispered through a tight, anguished little frown. "I am happy to find you. Nazir says to you, don't go anywhere. Don't do anything, for some days. There is a war now, a war of the gangs. They fight for Kader's power. It is not safe. Stay away from the Dunda places." The word Dunda, or business, was the slang term we used for all of Kader's black market operations in Bombay. They'd become targets, somehow. "What happened? What's it all about?" "The traitor, Ghani, is dead," he replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard and determined. "The men with him, his men in Kader's gang, will also die." "Ghani? Yes. Do you have money, Lynn?" "Sure," I muttered, thinking about Abdul Ghani. He was from Pakistan. That had to be it. The connections to the secret police, the Pakistan ISI, must have been his. Of course it was him. Of course he was the traitor. Of course he was the one who'd tried to have us arrested and killed in Karachi. That's who Khalid had been talking about on the night before the battle. Not Abdullah, but Ghani. "Abdul Ghani, do you have a place? A safe place?" "What?" "Yes. Good," he said, shaking my hand warmly. "Then I will see you here, in 3 days' time, in the day, at 1 o'clock, inshallah." "Inshallah," I responded, and he walked out. His handsome head was high, in his brave, righteous step, and his back was straight. I sat down again, avoiding the eyes of my friends until I could disguise the dread that I knew they would read in them. "What is it?" Didier asked. "Nothing," I lied, shaking my head and faking a smile. I reached for my glass and lifted it to clink against theirs. "Where were we?" "We were just going to toast Ranjit's dog," Vikram recalled, grinning widely, "but I'd like to include his horse in that toast, if it's not too late." "You do not know if he has a horse," Didier objected. "We don't know if he's got a dog, either," Vikram pointed out, "but that's not stopping us." "To Ranjit's dog. Ranjit's dog," we all replied. "And his horse," Vikram added. "And his neighbor's horse. Ranjit's horse. And horses, in general. And to lovers, everywhere," Didier proposed. "And to lovers, everywhere?" I answered. But somehow, in some way, for some reason, the love had died in me, and I suddenly realized it, and was suddenly sure. It wasn't completely over, my feeling for Carla. It never is completely over. But there was nothing of the jealousy I once would have felt for the stranger Ranjit. There was no rage against him, and no feeling of hurt inspired by her. I felt numbed and empty sitting there, as if the war, and the loss of Kaderbai and Khalid, and the face-off with Madame Jo and her twins had poured anesthetic into my heart. And there was, instead of pain, a sense of wonder. I could think of no other way to describe what I was feeling. At Abdul Ghani's treachery. And behind that almost spiritual awe there was a dull, throbbing, fatalistic dread. For even then the bloody future his betrayal had forced on us was unfolding and spilling into our lives, like the sudden blossom of a drought-forced rose in a red, falling rush to dry, unyielding earth. Chapter 39. 1 hour after I'd left Abdul Ghani's mansion to confront Madame Jo, Nazir and 3 of his most trusted men forced the door of the house next to Ghani's and made their way through the long basement workshop that connected the 2 houses. At about the time that I picked my way through the rubble of Madame Jo's ruined palace, Nazir and his men, wearing black knitted masks, pushed up the trapdoor in Ghani's kitchen and entered the house. They seized the cook, the yardman, Abdul's 2 servants, and the Sri Lankan counterfeiters, Vilu and Krishna, and locked them in a small room in the basement. As I climbed the blackened stairs of the palace to the attic and found Madame Jo, Nazir crept upstairs to Abdul's grand study and found him sitting in the wing chair, weeping and still. Then, at about the time that I uncurled the knotted fist of my revenge to pity my broken enemy, the drooling Madam, Nazir avenged himself and Kader Khan by killing the traitor who'd betrayed us all in Pakistan. 2 men held Abdul's arms against the chair. A 3rd man forced his head back and his eyes open. Nazir removed his mask. Staring into Abdul's eyes, Nazir stabbed him in the heart. Abdul must have known he had to die. He was sitting there, alone, waiting for his killers. But his scream, they say, came all the way from hell to claim him. They rolled his body off the chair and onto the polished floor. Then, as I struggled with Rajan and his twin in the attic across the city, Nazir and his men used heavy cleavers to hack off Abdul's hands, his feet, and his head. They scattered the pieces of his corpse around the great house, just as Abdul Ghani had ordered the Sapna killers to do with the butchered pieces of loyal old Majid's body. And as I left the ruined palace, my heart free and almost at peace for the first time in too many vengeful months, Nazir and his men released Krishna, Vilu, and the servants, all deemed to have had no part in Ghani's treachery, and then left the mansion to hunt down the members of Ghani's faction and kill them all. Ghani was freaking out for a long time, Yar. Sanjay Kumar said, translating freely from Nazir's Urdu into English. He thought Kader had gone crazy. He thought he was, like, obsessed, you know? He got the idea that Kader was going to lose all the business and the money and the power of the council. He thought Kader was spending too much time on Afghanistan, the war, and all that. And he knew Kader had all these other missions planned, stuff in Sri Lanka and Nigeria and such like. So when he couldn't talk Kader out of it, and he couldn't get him to change, he decided to use all this Sapna business. The Sapna thing was Ghani's operation, right from the start. All of it? I asked. Sure, Sanjay answered. Kader and Ghani, both. But Ghani was in charge. They were using the Sapna thing, you know, to get what they wanted from the cops and the government. How? Ghani's idea was to freak everybody out, the cops and the politicians and the other councils, with a common enemy. That was Sapna. When the Sapna guys started chopping people up all over the place, and talking about a revolution, and Sapna being the king of thieves and all that, everybody got worried. Nobody knew who was behind it. That got them to work with us, to catch the fucker, in exchange for our help. But Ghani, he was hoping to get a shot at Kader himself. I'm not sure he wanted that from the start, Salman Mustan interrupted, shaking his head at his close friend to emphasize his point. I think he started out just like always, backing Kader all the way. But that Sapna thing, that was some weird shit, man, and I think, you know, it bent his mind. Whatever, Sanjay continued, shrugging off the fine point. The result's the same. Ghani has this gang, the Sapna guys, his own gang, that only answer to him. And he's killing fuckers all over the place. Most of them were people he wanted to get rid of anyway, for business reasons, which I got no problem with. So everything's going fine, Yar. The whole fucking city is going crazy looking for this Sapna fucker, and all Kader's traditional enemies. They're falling all over themselves to help him smuggle guns and explosives and other heavy shit through Bombay because they want him to help them find out who this Sapna is, and take him out. It's a fucking crazy plan, but it's working, Yar. Then, one day, a cop comes to see him. It was that Patil, you know the guy, Lynn. That sub-inspector Suresh Patil. He used to work out of Kalaba. And he's such a cunt, Yar. But a smart one, Salman muttered respectfully. Oh, yeah, he's smart. He's a very smart cunt. And he tells Ghani that the Sapna killers have left a clue at the scene of their latest murder, and it leads back to the Kader Khan Council. Ghani freaks out. He can see all that shit he's been doing coming right home to his doorstep. So he decides that he's got to have a sacrifice. Someone from the Kader Khan Council itself, you know, right in the fucking heart of it all, that the Sapna guys can chop up to throw the cops off. They figured, if the cops saw one of our own guys get all chopped up, they'd have to think that Sapna was our enemy. And he picked Majid, Salman concluded for him. And it worked. Patil was the cop in charge of the case, and he was there when they were putting the pieces of Majid's body into carry bags. He knew how close Majid was to Kaderbai. Patil's dad, now there's a tough cop, Yar, had some history with Kaderbai. He put him in jail once. Kaderbai did time? I asked, disappointed that I'd never asked the Khan myself. We'd talked about prison often enough. Sure, Salman laughed. He even escaped, you know, from Arthur Road. You're fucking kidding. You didn't know that, Lin? No. It's a damn fine story, Yar, Salman stated, wagging his head enthusiastically. You should get Nazir to tell it some time. He was the outside man for Kader Khan during the escape. They were fucking wild guys, Nazir and Kaderbai, in those days, Yar. Sanjay, in agreement, clapped Nazir on the back with a hard, good-natured slap. It was almost exactly the place where Nazir had been wounded, and I knew the slap must have hurt, but he showed no sign of pain. Instead, he studied my face. It was my first formal debriefing after Abdul Ghani's death and the end of the 2-week gangster war that had cost 6 lives and put the power of the Mafia Council back in the hands of Nazir and the Kader faction. I met his gaze and nodded slowly. His stern, unsmiling face softened for an instant and then quickly set in its customary severity. Poor old Majid, Sanjay said, sighing heavily. He was just what the fuck do you call those red things? Those fish? A red herring, I said. Yeah, one of those herring fuckers. The cops. That Patil cunt and his guys. They decided that there wasn't any connection between Sapna and Kader's council. They knew how much Kader loved Majid, and they started looking in other places. Ghani was off the hook, and after a while his guys started chopping fuckers up again. Business as usual. How did Kader feel about it? About what? Sanjay asked. He means about Majid being killed, Salman cut in. Don't you, Lin? Yeah. There was a small hesitation as all 3 men looked at me. Their features were set in grim and almost resentful stillness, as if I'd asked them an impolite or embarrassing question. But their eyes, lit with secrets and lies, seemed regretful and saddened. Kader was cool with it, Salman answered. I felt my heart stutter, murmuring its pain. We were in the Macambo, a restaurant and coffee bar in the fort area. It was clean, well-serviced, and fashionably bohemian. Rich businessmen from the fort mixed with gangsters, lawyers, and celebrities from the movies and the rapidly developing television industries. I liked the place, and I'd been glad that Sanjay had chosen it for our meeting. We'd worked our way through a big but healthy lunch and kulfi dessert, and had moved on to our second coffee. Nazir sat at my left, with his back in a corner space, and facing the main street door. Next to him was Sanjay Kumar, the tough, young Hindu gangster from the suburb of Bandra who'd once been my training partner. He'd worked his way into a permanent position on what remained of Kader's Mafia Council. He was 30 years old, fit and heavy-set, with thick, dark brown hair that he blow-dried to match the bouffant of the movie heroes. His face was handsome. Wide-apart brown eyes, set deep into the shelter of a high brow, looked out with humor and confidence over a wide nose, a smiler's mouth, and a softly rounded chin. He laughed easily, and it was always a good, warm laugh, no matter how often he provoked himself to it. And he was generous. It was almost impossible to pay a bill in his company, not, as some thought, because he grandised himself with the gesture, but rather because it was his instinct to give and to share. He was also brave, and as dependable in a violent crisis as he was from day to mundane day. He was an easy man to like, and I did like him, and I had to remind myself with a little nudge of will, now and then, that he was one of the men who'd hacked off Abdul Ghani's hands and feet and head with a butcher's cleaver. The fourth man at our table, sitting next to Sanjay, as always, was Salman, his best friend. Salman Mustan was born in the same year as Sanjay, and had grown up with him in the bustling, crowded suburb of Bandra. He'd been a precocious child, I'd been told, who'd surprised his impoverished parents by topping every subject in every class at his junior school. His success was the more remarkable for the fact that, from the day of his 5th birthday, the boy had worked 20 hours a week with his father, plucking chickens and sweeping out at the local poultry yard. I knew his history well, piecing it together from stories and confidences he'd shared when we'd worked out together at Abdullah's gym. When Salman had announced that he had to leave school to work longer hours in support of his family, a teacher who knew Abdul Qadir Khan asked the Don to intercede on his behalf. Salman became one of Qadirbai's scholarship children, like my advisor, in the slum clinic, Dr. Hamid, and it was decided that he should be groomed toward a career as a lawyer. Qadir enrolled Salman in a Catholic college run by Jesuit priests, and every day the boy from the slum dressed in a clean, white uniform and took his place among the sons of the rich elite. It was a good education. Salman's spoken English was eloquent, and his general knowledge roved through history and geography to literature, science, and art. But there was a wildness in the boy and a restless hunger for excitement that even the strong arms and the hard canes of the Jesuits couldn't tame. While Salman struggled with the Jesuits, Sanjay had found a job in Qadirbai's gang. He worked as a runner, carrying messages and contraband between mafia offices throughout the city. In the first weeks of that service, Sanjay was stabbed during a fight with men from a rival gang who'd tried to rob him. The boy fought back and evaded his attackers, delivering his contraband parcel to Qadir's collection center, but his wound was serious and he took 2 months to recover from it. Salman, his lifelong friend, blamed himself for not being with Sanjay, and he left school immediately. He begged the Khan for permission to join his friend and work with him as a runner. Qadir agreed, and from that day the boys worked together at every crime in the council's catalog. They were just 16 then, at the beginning. They both turned 30 in the weeks before our meeting in the Macambo. The wild boys had become hard men who lavished gifts on their families, and lived with a certain gaudy, aggressive cool. Although they'd supported their sisters into prestigious marriages, both men were unmarried, in a country where that was unpatriotic at the least, and sacrilegious at worst. They'd refused to marry, Salman told me, because of a shared belief or presentiment that they would die violently and they would die young. The prospect didn't frighten or worry them. They saw it as a reasonable trade-off. Excitement and power and wealth enough to provide for their families, balanced against short lives that rushed into the dead end of a knife or a gun. And when Nazir's group won the gangster war against Ghani's group, the two friends found themselves on the new council, young mafia dons in their own right. I think Ghani did try to warn Qadirbai what was in his heart, Salman said thoughtfully, his voice clear and his English rounded to the nearest decibel point. He talked about that hero curse thing for a good year or so before he decided to create Sapna. Fuck him, Yar, Sanjay snarled. Who the fuck was he to be giving Qadirbai warnings? Who the fuck was he to get us all in the shit with Patil, so he had to have his guys cut up old Majid? And then, after everything, he went and sold everybody out to the fucking Pakistani cops, Yar. Fuck him. If I could dig the Matitude up and kill him again, I'd do it today. I'd do it every day. It would be my fucking hobby, like. Who was the real Sapna? I asked. Who actually did the killings for Abdul? I remember Qadir told me once, after Abdullah was killed, that he found the real Sapna. He said he killed him. Who was he? And why did he kill him if he was working for him in the first place? The two younger men turned to face Nazir. Sanjay asked him a few questions in Urdu. It was an act of respect toward the older man. They knew the facts as well as Nazir did, but they deferred to his recollection of them and included him in the discussion. I understood most of Nazir's reply, but I waited for Sanjay to translate. His name was Jitendra, Jitudada, they called him. He was a gun and machete guy from Delhi side. Ghani brought him down here with 4 other guys. He actually kept them in 5-star hotels, like, the whole fucking time, 2 years, man. Bahan chewed. Complaining about Qadir spending money on the Mujahideen and the war and all, and meanwhile he was keeping these psycho fuckers in 5-star hotels for 2 fucking years. Jitudada got drunk when Abdullah was killed, Salman added. It really got to him, you know, that everyone was saying Sapna was dead. He'd been doing the Sapna thing for nearly 2 years, and it had started to twist his brain. He started to believe his own, or Ghani's, bullshit. Stupid fucking name. Yar, Sanjay cut in. It's a girl's name, Sapna. It's a fucking girl's name. It's like me calling myself fucking Lucy, or some such. What kind of a bad fucker calls himself a girl's name, Yar? The kind who kills 11 people, Salman answered, and almost gets away with it. Anyway, he got completely drunk the night Abdullah was killed and everybody was saying that Sapna was dead. And he started shooting his mouth off, telling anyone who would listen that he was the real Sapna. They were in a bar in the President Hotel. Then he starts shouting that he was ready to tell it all, who was behind the Sapna killings, you know, and who planned it all and paid for it all. Fucking Gandu, Sanjay growled, using the slang word for arsehole. I never met one of these psychotypes who wasn't a fucking squealer, Yar. Lucky for us, there were mostly foreigners in the place that night, so they didn't know what he was talking about. One of our guys was there, in the bar, and he told Jitu to shut the fuck up. Jitu Dada said he wasn't afraid of Abdul Qadir Khan because he had plans for Qadir as well. He said Qadir was going to end up in pieces, just like Majid. Then he starts waving a gun around. Our guy called Qadir right away. And the Khan, he went and did that one himself. He went with Nazir and Khalid, and Farid, and Ahmedzadeh, and young Andrew Ferreira, and some others. I missed that one, fuck it. Sanjay cursed. I wanted to fix that magnitude from the first day, and especially after Majid. But I was on a job, in Goa. Anyway, Qadir fixed them up. They found them near the car park of the President Hotel. Jitu Dada and his guys put up a fight. There was a big shootout. 2 of our guys got hit. One of them was Hussein, you know, he runs the numbers in Ballard Pier now. That's how he lost his arm. He took a shotgun blast, both barrels of a crowd pleaser, a sawn off, and it tore his arm right off his body. If Ahmedzadeh hadn't wrapped him up and dragged him out of there and off to hospital, he would have bled to death, right there in the car park. All 4 of them who were there, Jitu Dada and his 3 guys, got wasted. Qadir put the last bullets into their heads himself. But one of those Sapna guys wasn't in the car park and he got away. We never tracked him down. He went back to Delhi and he disappeared from there. We haven't heard anything since. I liked that Ahmedzadeh, Sanjay said quietly, dispensing what was, for him, extravagantly high praise with a little sigh of sorrowing recollection. Yeah, I agreed, remembering the man who'd always looked as though he was searching for a friend in a crowd. The man who died with his hand clenched in mine. He was a good guy. Nazir spoke again, grunting the words at us in his wrathful style as if they were threats. When the Pakistani cops were tipped off about Qadir, Sanjay translated, it was obvious that it had to be Abdul Ghani behind it. I nodded my agreement. It was obvious. Abdul Ghani was from Pakistan. His connections there went deep and high. He'd told me about it more than once when I'd worked for him. I wondered why I hadn't seen it at the time, when the cops raided our hotel in Pakistan. My first thought was that I'd simply liked him too much to suspect him, and that was true. More to the point, perhaps, was how flattered I'd been by his attention. Ghani had been my patron on the council, after Qadir himself, and he'd invested time, energy, and affection in our friendship. And there was something else that might have distracted me in Karachi. My mind had been filled with shame and revenge. I remembered that much from the visit to the mosque when I'd sat beside Qadir and Khalid to hear the blind singers. I remembered reading Didier's letter and deciding, in that shifting, yellow lamplight, that I would kill Madame Jo. I remembered thinking that and then turning my head to see the love in Qadir's golden eyes. Could that love and that anger have smothered something so important, something so obvious, as Ghani's treachery? And if I'd missed that, what else had I missed? Qadir wasn't supposed to make it out of Pakistan, Salman added. Qadir, Nazir, Khalid, even you. Abdul Ghani thought it was his chance to take out the whole council in one shot, all the guys on the council who weren't with him. But Qadir had his own friends in Pakistan, and they warned him, and you made it out of the trap. I think Abdul must have known he was finished from that day on. But he held his peace, and he didn't make any moves here. He was hoping, I guess, that Qadir, and the whole lot of you, might be killed in the war. Nazir interrupted him, impatient with the English that he despised. I thought I understood what he'd said, and I translated his words, looking to Sanjay for confirmation that my guess was correct. Kader told Nazir to keep the truth about Abdul Ghani a secret. He said that if anything happened to him in the war, Nazir was to return to Bombay and avenge him. Was that it? Yeah, Sanjay wagged his head. You got it. And after we did that, we had to fix the rest of the guys who were on Ghani's side. There's none of them left now. They're all dead, or they got the fuck out of Bombay. Which brings us to the point. Salman smiled. It was a rare smile, but a good one. A tired man's smile, an unhappy man's smile, a tough man's smile. His long face was a little lopsided with one eye lower than the other by the thickness of a finger, a break in his nose that had settled crookedly, and a mouth that hitched in one corner where a fist had split the lip and a suture had pulled the skin too tightly. His short hair formed a perfectly round hairline on his brow like a dark halo that pressed down hard on his slightly jugged ears. We want you to run the passports for a while. Krishna and Vilu are very insistent. They're freaked out of their fucking brains, Sanjay cut in. They're scared stupid because guys were getting chopped all over Bombay, starting with Ghani while they were right there in the fucking cellar. Now the war's over, and we won, but they're still scared. We can't afford to lose them, Lin. We want you to work with them and settle them down, like. They're asking about you all the time, and they want you to work with them. They like you, man. I looked at each of them in turn, and settled my eyes on Nazir. If my understanding was correct, it was a tempting offer. The victorious Kader faction had reformed the local mafia council under old Saban Mahmud. Nazir had become a full member of the council, as had Mahmud Melbath. The others included Sanjay and Salman, Farid, and 3 other Bombay-born dons. All of the last 6 spoke Marathi every bit as well as they spoke Hindi or English. That gave me a unique and very significant point of contact with them because I was the only Gora any of them knew who could speak Marathi. I was the only Gora any of them knew who'd been leg-ironed at Arthur Road Prison. And I was one of the very few men, brown or white, who'd survived Kader's war. They liked me. They trusted me. They saw me as a valuable asset. The gangster war was over. In the new Pax Mafia that ruled their part of the city, fortunes could be made. And I needed the money. I'd been living on my savings, and I was almost broke. What exactly did you have in mind? I asked Nazir, knowing that Sanjay would reply. You run the books, the stamps, all the passport stuff, and the licenses, permits, and credit cards, he answered quickly. You get complete control, just the way it was with Ghani. No fucking problem. Whatever you need, you get it. You take a piece of that action. I'm thinking about 5%, but we can talk about that if you don't think it's enough, Yar. And you can visit the council whenever you want, Salman added. Sort of an observer status, if you get my meaning. What do you say? You'd have to move the operation from Ghani's basement, I said quietly. I'd never feel happy about working there, and I'm not surprised the place has got Vilu and Krishna spooked. No problem, Sanjay laughed, slapping the table. We're going to sell the place anyway. You know, Lin brother, that fat fuck Ghani put the 2 big houses, his own one and the place next door, in his brother-in-law's name. Nothing wrong with that. Fuck, man, we all do that. But they're worth fucking crores, Lin. They're fucking mansions, Baba. And then, after we sliced and diced the fat fuck, his brother-in-law decides he doesn't want to sign the places over to us. Then he gets tough and starts talking lawyers and police. So we had to tie him up over a big dubba of acid, Yar. Then he's not tough anymore. Then he can't wait to sign the places over to us. We sent Farid to do the job. He took care of it. But he got so fucked up, Yar, with the disrespect Ghani's brother-in-law showed us, and he was real angry with the Matitude for making him set up the acid barrel and all. He likes to keep things simple, our brother Farid. The whole hanging the cunt up over the acid thing, it was all a bit, what did you call it, Salman? What was the word? Tawdry, Salman suggested. Yeah, ta fucking dry the whole thing. Farid, he likes to get respect, or cut to the chase and gun the motherfucker down, like. So, angry as he is, he takes the brother-in-law's own house as well, makes him sign over his own house, just for being such a big matitude about Gani's houses. So now he's got nothing, that guy, and we got 3 houses on the market instead of 1. It's a vicious and bloodthirsty racket, that property business, Salman concluded with a wry smile. I'm moving us into it as soon as I can. We're taking over one of the big agencies. I've got Farid working on it. Okay, Lynn, if you don't want to work at Gani's place, where would you like us to set it up for you? I like Tardeo, I suggested. Somewhere near Haji Ali. Why Tardeo? Sanjay asked. I like Tardeo. It's clean, and it's quiet. And it's near Haji Ali. I like Haji Ali. I've got kind of a sentimental connection to the place. Thick Hain, Lynn, Salman agreed. Tardeo it is. We'll tell Farid to start looking right away. Anything else? I'll need a couple of runners, guys I can trust. I'd like to pick my own men. Who've you got in mind? Sanjay asked. You don't know them. They're outside guys. But they're both good men. Johnny Sagar and Kishore. I trust them, and I know I can rely on them. Sanjay and Salman exchanged a glance and looked to Nazir. He nodded. No problem, Salman said. Is that it? One more thing, I added, turning to Nazir. I want Nazir as my contact on the council. If there's any problem, for any reason, I want to deal with Nazir first. Nazir nodded again, favoring me with a little smile deep in his eyes. I shook hands with each man in turn to seal the deal. The exchange was a little more formal and solemn than I'd expected it to be, and I had to clench my jaw to stifle a laugh. And those attitudes, their gravitas and my recusa impulse to laugh, registered the difference between us. For all that I liked Salman, Sanjay, and the others, and the truth was that I loved Nazir, and owed him my life, the mafia was, for me, a means to an end and not an end in itself. For them, the mafia was a family, an infrangible bond that held them from minute to minute and all the way to the dying breath. Their solemnity expressed that kin's sacred obligation from eye to eye and hand to hand, but I knew they never believed it was like that for me. They took me in and worked with me, the white guy, the wild Gora who went to the war with Abdul Qadir Khan. But they expected me to leave them, sooner or later, and return to the other world of my memory and my blood. I didn't think that, and I didn't expect it, because I'd burned all the bridges that might have led me home. And although I had to stop myself from laughing at the earnestness of the little ceremony, the handshake had, in fact, formally inducted me into the ranks of professional criminals. Until that moment, the crimes I'd committed had been in the service of Qadir Khan. As difficult as it is for anyone outside that world to understand, there was a sense in which I'd been able to say, with sincerity, that I'd committed them for love of him. For my own safety, certainly, but, beyond every other reason, for the father's love I'd craved from him. With Qadir gone, I could have made the break completely. I could have gone, almost anywhere. I could have done something else. But I didn't. I joined my fate to theirs and became a gangster for nothing more than the money and the power and the protection that their brotherhood promised. And it kept me busy, breaking laws for a living, so busy that I managed to hide most of what I felt from the heart that was feeling it. Everything moved quickly after that meeting at the Macambo. Farid found new premises within a week. The 2-story building, only a short walk from the floating mosque, Haji Ali, had been a records office for a branch of the Bombay Municipal Corporation. When the BMC had moved to larger, more modern offices, they'd left most of the old benches, desks, storage cupboards, and shelves behind as stock fittings. They were well suited to our needs, and I spent a week supervising a team of cleaners and laborers who dusted and polished every surface while moving the furniture around to make way for the machinery and light tables from Gani's basement. Our men loaded that specialist equipment onto a large, covered truck and delivered it to the new premises late at night. The street was unusually quiet as the heavy truck backed up to the double folding doors of our new factory. But alarm bells and the heavier clang of fire engine bells jangled in the distance. Standing beside our truck, I looked along the deserted street in the direction of the frantic sound. It must be a big fire, I muttered to Sanjay, and he laughed out loud. Farid started a fire, Salman said, answering for his friend. We told him we didn't want anyone watching us move this stuff into the new place, so he started the fire as a diversion. That's why the street is so empty. Everybody who is awake has gone to the fire. He burned down a rival company, Sanjay laughed. Now we are officially in the real estate business because our biggest rivals have just closed down due to fire damage. We start our new real estate office not far from here tomorrow. And tonight, no curious fuckers are here to see us move our stuff into your new workshop. Farid killed 2 birds with 1 match, nah? So, while fire and smoke singed the midnight sky, and bells and sirens railed about a kilometer away, we directed our men as they moved the heavy equipment into the new factory. And Krishna and Vilu went to work almost at once. In the months that I'd been away, Ghani had followed my suggestion to push the focus of the operation laterally into the production of permits, certificates, diplomas, licenses, letters of credit, security passes, and other documents. It was a booming trade in the booming economy of Bombay, and we often worked through the dawn to satisfy the demand. And the business was generational. As licensing authorities and other bodies modified their documents in response to our forgeries, we dutifully copied and then counterfeited them again, at additional cost. It's a kind of Red Queen contest, I said to Salman Mustan when the new passport factory had been running for 6 diligent months. Like Rani? He asked. A Red Queen? Yeah, it's a biology thing. It's about hosts, like human bodies, and parasites, like viruses and such. I studied it when I was running my clinic in the Jopatpati. The hosts, our bodies, and the viruses, any bug that makes us sick, are locked in a competition with each other. When the parasite attacks, the host develops a defense. Then the virus changes to beat that defense, so the host gets a new defense. And that keeps on going. They call it a Red Queen contest. It's from the story, you know, Alice in Wonderland. I know it, Salman answered. We did it at school. But I never understood it. That's okay, nobody does. Anyway, the little girl, Alice, she meets this Red Queen, who runs incredibly fast but never seems to get anywhere. She tells Alice that, in her country, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. And that's like us with the passport authorities and the licensing boards and the banks all over the world. They keep changing the passports and other documents to make it harder for us. And we keep finding new ways to fake them. And they keep changing the way they make them, and we keep finding new ways to fake them and forge them and adapt them for ourselves. It's a Red Queen contest, and we all have to run real fast just to stand still. I think you're doing better than standing still, he asserted. His tone was quiet but adamant. You've done a damn fine job, Lynn. The ID stuff is deadly. It's a real big market. They can't get enough. And it's good work. So far, all our guys who've used your books have gone through without any problems, yar. As a matter of fact, that's why I've called you to have lunch with us today. I've got a surprise for you, kind of a present, like, and I'm sure you're going to like it. It's a way of saying thanks, yar, for the great job you've been doing. I didn't look at him. We were walking quickly, side by side, along Mahatma Gandhi Road toward the Regal Circle roundabout on a hot, cloudless afternoon. Where the footpath was clogged with shoppers halting at the tabletop street stalls, we walked on the road with a slow, unceasing stream of traffic behind and beside us. I didn't look at Salman because I'd come to know him well enough during those 6 months to be sure he was embarrassed by the praise he'd felt moved to lavish on me. Salman was a natural leader but, like many men who have the gift of command and the instinct to rule, he was deeply troubled by every expression of the leadership art. He was, at heart, a humble man, and that humility made him an honorable man. Letty had once said that she found it strange and incongruous to hear me describe criminals, killers, and mafiosi as men of honor. The confusion, I think, was hers, not mine. She'd confused honor with virtue. Virtue is concerned with what we do, and honor is concerned with how we do it. You can fight a war in an honorable way. The Geneva Convention exists for that very reason, and you can enforce the peace without any honor at all. In its essence, honor is the art of being humble. And gangsters, just like cops, politicians, soldiers, and holy men, are only ever good at what they do if they stay humble. You know, he remarked, as we moved to the wider footpath opposite the cloisters of the university buildings, I'm glad it didn't work out with your friends. The ones you wanted to help you with the passports, right at the start. I frowned, and remained silent, keeping pace with his rapid step. Johnny Cigar and Kishore had refused to join me in the passport factory, and it had shocked and disappointed me. I'd assumed that they would jump at the chance to make money, to make more money with me than either of them had ever dreamed of making alone. I'd never anticipated the saddened and offended expressions that closed their smiles when they understood, at last, that I was offering them nothing more than the golden opportunity to commit crimes with me. It had never occurred to me that they wouldn't want to do it. It had never occurred to me that they would refuse to work with criminals and for criminals. I remembered turning away from their stony, closed, embarrassed smiles that day. I remembered the question that had knotted into a fist in my mind, right behind the eyes. Was I so far out of touch with the thoughts and feelings of decent men? The question still rankled 6 months later. The answer still stared back at me from the mirrored windows of the shops we passed as we walked. If those guys of yours had worked out, Salman continued, I wouldn't have put Farid with you. And I'm damn glad that I did put him with you. He's a much happier guy now. He's a much more relaxed kind of guy. He likes you, Lynn. I like him, too, I replied quickly, smiling through my frown. And it was true. I did like Farid, and I was glad that we'd become close friends. Farid, the shy but capable youngster I'd met on my first visit to Cater's Mafia Council more than 3 years before, had toughened up to a hard, fearless, angry man whose sense of loyalty assumed the full measure of his young life. When Johnny Cigar and Kishore rejected my offers of work, Salman had put Farid in the Gone, Andrew Ferreira, to work with me. Andrew had been genial and talkative, but he'd moved only reluctantly from the company of his young gangster friends, and we hadn't become close. Farid, however, had spent most days and many nights with me, and we liked and understood one another. He was right on the edge, I think, when Cater died and we had to clean out Ghani's guys, Salman confided. It got pretty rough, you remember, we all did some unusual things. But Farid was wild. He was starting to worry me. You have to get heavy sometimes in our business. That's just how it is. But you got a problem on your hands when you start to enjoy it, nah? I had to talk to him. Farid, I said to him, cutting people up should not be the first option. It should be a long way down the list. It shouldn't even be on the same page as the first option. But he went right on doing it. Then I put him with you. And now, after 6 months, he's a much calmer guy. It worked out well, yar. I think I'll just have to put all the really bad and mad motherfuckers with you, Lynn, to straighten them out. He blamed himself for not being there when Cater died, I said as we rounded the curve of the domed Jehangir Art Gallery. Seeing a small gap in the traffic, we jogged across the roundabout at Regal Circle Junction, dodging and weaving between the cars. We all did, Salman muttered softly when we took up a position outside the Regal Cinema. It was a tiny phrase, 3 small words, and it said nothing new, nothing more than I already knew to be true. Yet that little phrase thundered in my heart, and an avalanche of grieving began to tremble, shift, and slide. For almost a year, and until that very moment, my anger at Kotterbai had shielded me from the pain of grieving for him. Others had crumbled and withered and raged in their shock and sorrow at his death. I'd been so angry with him that my share of grief was still up there, beneath the smothering snow, in those mountains where he'd died. I'd felt a sense of loss. I'd suffered almost from the start. And I didn't hate the Khan. I'd loved him, always, and still loved him in that instant as we stood outside the cinema, waiting for our friends. But I hadn't really grieved for him, not in the way that I'd grieved for Prabhakar or even Abdullah. Somehow, Salman's casual remark that we all blamed ourselves for not being with Cater when he died had shaken my frozen sorrowing free, and the slow, inexorable snowslip of its heartache began, right there and then. We must be a bit early, Salman observed cheerily, and I flinched as I forced myself into the moment with him. Yeah. They're coming by car, we're walking, and still we beat them here. It's a good walk. At night it's even better. I do that walk a lot. The causeway to VT and back. It's one of my favorite walks in the whole city. Salman looked at me, a smile on his lips and a frown exaggerating the slightly crooked tilt of his almond brown eyes. You really love this place, don't you? He asked. Sure I do, I replied, a little defensively. That doesn't mean I like everything about it. There's a lot that I don't like. But I do love the place. I love Bombay, and I think I always will. He grinned and looked away down the street. I struggled to hold the set of my features, to keep. I struggled. I love, but I do love the place. Sure I do, I replied, a little defensively.